I'm really excited to have you here, Sherry.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here too.
Yeah, I wanted to bring you on because you really have a very compelling story, a very inspiring story that I think is going to help the listeners of my show. And I know you transform a lot of lives. So can you start by just introducing yourself and just who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently in Montreal, Quebec, and I've been in the health and wellness space for over 23 years now. And the way that I got into it is a little bit by accident. And so I think we have to rewind a little bit into my childhood. Growing up, I was a child athlete. I was in so many sports. I think swimming was my most powerful sport. And I was very used to always placing top in whatever sport that I engaged in. And so in high school, I played varsity sports. And when I was 16, I was actually hit by a car. I was downtown Lugano, Switzerland with my roommate. We were actually purchasing Pearl Jam tickets and I was hit by a car. And after that, my whole world changed. I was asked not to play sports again. By the time I turned 17, I had surgery on my back for the first time. I've actually had surgery on my back twice. And so I had to shift away from that athletic mindset into a person who was now a victim of their circumstance, a victim of the injury that they had gone through. And so through many years, I actually rebuilt my identity around being able to, first of all, better connect with my body, with myself, and to overcome the limitations that were told to me and then start to rebuild upon that. By the time I started to work with people, I had already had surgery on my back twice, and I found a way to eat and to train and to move that was respectful of my body. And so that was essentially what I wanted to give others, is to help them overcome an obstacle. And I believe we all have something that stands in the way of our health and fitness. I believe that fitness is possible for everyone. And it's just a matter of working with our body, listening to our body, and then finding a way where exercise and nutrition works for us and not trying to fit into the mold of what exercise should look like or what diet should look like in general.
Yeah, I really love that. And I loved learning more about you and about your story of overcoming this injury. To me, it's just so powerful because, like you said, everyone does have an excuse or a reason that they can't sort of build a better life for themselves. And you were able to use this to transform not only yourself, but other people. I want to dive a little bit into the athletic identity that you talked about. I was an athlete too. I was also a competitive swimmer growing up. I ran track, I ran cross country in college, played every sport imaginable. And it's such a huge part of people's lives. And I felt like it was almost a defense against dieting for me for many years. Like
Mhm.
as a teenager, I wanted to eat a lot. I wanted to be strong. I wanted to succeed in my sports. But then I ended up falling into the diet trap and dieting and losing a lot of weight and becoming weaker. And then eventually getting into binge eating. It actually felt like it stripped that athletic identity away from me. And I know that, this can happen to a lot of athletes, like that if you fall into the wrong food and fitness behaviors, it can actually hurt your athletic identity. I want to talk about that in relation to, your own story. Like, how were you able to recapture the athletic identity after that obstacle that you faced?
Oh, so good. I love that you asked this question, and it's so important. And everything that you just said absolutely resonated with me. And actually see a lot of parallels in our story. And so when I first got into the health and fitness space, I actually had transferred away from studies in biochemistry. I was doing my master's degree in biochemistry and chemistry. And because I was starting to feel better in my body, I had just had, my back surgeries and I was overcoming this pain. I suddenly wanted to step into this world. And so as I did that, I got so many certifications and different type of training. And then of course, Kathryn, I started learning about diets. It was the first time in my life that I actually came across diets or rules around food or ultimately what we should be eating. And that's sort of what diet culture gives us. It gives us a bunch of rules and it tells us we should be eating that. And the best way to eat is that. And we're actually meant for this and we're not supposed to do that. And so I started actually getting into all of these different philosophies. And what I ended up doing is trying one diet at a time. So at first, when that was in my early 20s, not to date myself, but at first when I got into that space, it was about the low calorie diet. And so I was counting my calories, and then it was low fat diet. And so then I did that for a while. And then I got into the CrossFit world. And then all of a sudden that became paleo and then keto and then the zone diet. And then I even became vegan for a while. And I never really needed to release weight. That wasn't the reason why I was doing it. It was because I had too much information. And because of all that information, I was actually left very, very confused. And that's when it started to become very apparent to me that not only was I suffering secretly and silently with a binge eating disorder, because Kathryn, I was really good all week. I was on track all week. I was on the wagon all week. And all of a sudden Friday night would hit and I would find myself needing to reward myself. Or if I was at a party and I ended up having something that was not in my rule book, then I suddenly found myself feeling more out of control around that food. And so as I noticed that in me, I started also to notice that in my athletes, and I call them athletes, and we'll get to that in a moment, my athletes that I was working with, people who are suffering with weight for a long amount of time in their life, are not suffering because of a lack of discipline or motivation, or that they don't even want it bad enough. But instead, it's really because there could be many reasons that brings them to this place. But one of the greatest reasons is that they have developed this diet mindset, which probably started when they were teenagers or maybe even before. And so the athletic mindset really is not about the doing, it's about the being, where we are told by diet culture that we should look a certain way, that we should move a certain way, that we should eat a certain way so that we can ultimately change our physical appearance. Being an athlete is really about the being part. It's about focusing on nutrition because you want to recover from your training, or you want to sleep better, or you want to prepare for your next workout. And similarly, you train a certain way, not because your goal is to burn a certain number of calories, but because it's really focused on performance. And so the more that we shift our focus from this right now, whatever I'm doing right now, being an exchange for this moment in the future where I'm going to look really great, or I'm going to lose 10 pounds, or I'm going to change my physical appearance, I'm actually now focusing on doing certain things to make me feel good so that I can perform better, so that I can feel better, so that I can fuel my body, so that I can improve my sleep and improve my mood. And so shifting into that space really takes the focus on the food as being the vehicle to transform the body, but instead it's really about all of the different things in our lives, all of the different choices that we make throughout the day being the vehicle to improve our performance and ultimately our identity. And the other thing too is when you start to study athletes a little bit more, and I have this obsession where on Netflix, I study all the athletes. There's a Michael Jordan documentary there. There are several documentaries there, just really high level athletes. But I like to study their mindset, and they're never focused on how they look. They're always focused on what they can do, what more they can achieve, competing against themselves for really improving themselves, and not because they wanted to look a certain way necessarily.
Yeah, it's such a helpful mindset shift. And I always encourage people, like people who are struggling with binging, people who listen to this podcast, to get away from that dieting mentality. And people think, oh, that means you're telling me not to be healthy. That means you're telling me that I should just eat whatever I want, whenever I want, and not care about my weight or my fitness. But that's really not it. Because it really, in giving up dieting, opens you up to truly focusing on your health and focusing on taking care of yourself. And like you talked about, how you feel, what you can do. And if you are someone who likes fitness, someone who grew up as an athlete, and maybe you got away from that, maybe it's time to step back into that athlete mentality and recapture that part of yourself in whatever way you can. I mean, I know that the way I'm an athlete now is very different from when I was younger and more, just younger, I guess. But yeah, you can do different things at different phases of your life and just capture that part of yourself. And it will help you want to take care of yourself and want to make those better choices every day. So yeah, I really appreciate all of that.
Yeah, something to add. I love what you just brought up about this concept of intuitive eating. And I think a lot of us are misunderstanding that. When we're talking about focusing on how we feel or releasing diet mindset, it's not about leaning in towards the processed food and leaning in towards foods that don't serve us. Because ultimately, if we ate donuts for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day for a week, we actually wouldn't feel good. Our body would rebel. It would tell us, stop that. I don't feel good. I won't sleep well. And the way that I would show up at the gym for my training sessions or for the workouts I had planned out, that would definitely be impacted in some way. And so the listening to your body and releasing diet mindset is not about eating whatever you want and just disregarding what doesn't serve you, but it's instead being more in tune with your body and how you react to certain things. Because Kathryn, if you and I ate the same thing every single day, we wouldn't react to food the same way. Some things would make me feel good and other things would maybe bloat me compared to maybe how your body would respond to them.
Yeah, I totally agree with all that. I mean, I definitely believe that everybody is different as far as what foods feel the best, what foods fuel you the best. So yeah, and also everyone's different as far as what workouts fuel you the best. So how do you kind of go about helping people find the type of fitness routines and practices that are sustainable and that, work uniquely for their body?
Oh, so good. Yeah, I'm all about the rule of addition first before subtraction. And so what that means is incorporating positive habits first that you enjoy, that you find sustainable, that you don't feel is heavy for you to do, and then slowly start to build on that. And what I mean by the heaviness is if I hate running and every time I go for a run, it feels like I'm pulling this 100-pound sled every single time. Maybe that doesn't align really with me. I have to really take on something that I can find enjoyable. And so we have this almost this nature to really bring on intensity first before we establish any sort of consistency in our regimen, whether that is food related or nutrition related or even exercise related. And so we underestimate what 5 minutes a day can do, and then we overestimate really how much we actually need to do in order to see results. And any outcome or any result is based on consistency. It is consistency over time, which means doing a little bit for a long amount of time, for a long period of time, versus doing a lot at one time sporadically. And so even 5 minutes a day of exercise, which is actually what I share on my YouTube channel and really are the nature of my workouts, they're 6 to 20 minutes max. And that's realistic because most people don't have time to do that. And most people need a way to be able to incorporate small little routines in their day in a way where it does become sustainable. But when we do get started and when I help somebody take on new habits, it really has to start with meeting them where they are. And so it's learning, first of all, what is going on in their body? What injuries do we need to address? And what do we enjoy doing? What do we realistically have time for? And then move towards becoming 1% better every single day. Start with a little bit and then gradually start to increase it, and only increase it once you feel that you can handle that and realistically see yourself doing for a long period of time. I believe in sustainability, and more importantly, to not get into a place where we feel defeated. That becomes very, very demoralizing for a person, and it actually gives them this feedback that no matter how much I try, it doesn't work for me. And so anything that we can do, any habit that we can add that would take away from that feeling of defeat is super important when it comes to addressing certain habits or incorporating new ones. But the ultimate rule that I'll always share with anyone is consistency first before intensity, and the exercise or the activity or the change in nutrition has to feel light and fun and easy and something that you can see yourself doing long term.
Yeah, I love all of that. I mean, it's so easy for people to become overwhelmed and you think, okay, because I can't work out for an hour and a half, then I'm just not going to do anything. It's very similar to the mindset of, okay, if I can't stick to this perfect diet, I might as well just eat everything in the pantry. And the brain kind of plays tricks on us that way. And a lot of the mindset is similar. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And I feel the same way about food. You know, people should make gradual, sustainable changes, just like you're talking about, and with exercise too. So I guess something I want to ask is when people do start these gradual sustainable changes, how do you teach them to harness that athletic mindset within themselves and just develop that athletic identity?
So good. Yeah, it comes from really self-talk. And I believe whatever we say after I am is our truth. And I see this so much in my gym. I used to actually own a CrossFit gym for many, many years before the pandemic. And I would see people coming in, and every single time they would do something really great or they would have a new personal record, there was always a way to diffuse that congratulatory moment. There was always a way to just take away from that win. And so if you told somebody, great job, you did this so much faster, the answer oftentimes would be, yeah, but I still have so much to go, or yeah, I still have so much work to do, or yeah, but I still didn't RX. And there was always a way that that person essentially would take away from that win. And so the first thing that we have to really establish is the belief system. So really the self-talk in itself. And so this is the hardest step. And this is where it actually takes the most amount of work, is really to start to just focus on creating more awareness around our thoughts and to start to audit our thoughts. And every time we hear ourselves saying something negative that follows I am, we rewire the brain, we rewire the thoughts to say something more empowering. And so I would also see then the transformation happen the moment a person steps into that I am a badass. I am awesome. I am strong. I am capable. I am determined. I am resilient. I am resourceful. And the moment we step into more of that self-talk, we ultimately become that. And that's where really things start to become easy, start to become light. And actually there's a neurological shift that ends up happening. And we step out of the sympathetic nervous state into a parasympathetic nervous state when we get into that sense of calm, instead of it really always feeling a sense of aggression or a sense of discomfort in the actions that we're doing.
That's really amazing. So I love learning about the brain, and a lot of my work is focused around neuroplasticity and changing your brain. So that all of that resonates with me. And the brain is so biased toward that negativity. Like people talk about the negativity bias of the brain. So it's very natural for you to say, well, yeah, but I didn't accomplish everything I wanted to. Yeah, but it wasn't good enough. That's so normal. But the more you can recognize that and then start using those I am statements that you talked about and really telling yourself the positive things, it's so powerful. So I appreciate all of that. What about people who just feel like so far away from being an athlete? You know, people who feel like, okay, I haven't even gone for a walk in so long. You know, where do people start?
Right. Yeah. And just coming back to what you're mentioning about the brain, is sometimes when we set up our goals where they are momentarily at this very present moment feeling very far away from us or feeling very unrealistic, it's hard for us to create a vision around that and make that become real in our mind. And so one of the slogans I oftentimes use is believe, begin, become. And so it has to start with the belief. So if right now, Kathryn, I'm 43 years old. I've had surgery on my back twice. And if I start to say to myself that I'm going to become an Olympic gymnast, okay, and I've never done gymnastics before in my life, and I'm not flexible, and I'm 43, and I don't even know where I would start. I would maybe have to just readdress that goal, and again, make it something that seems more tangible, more achievable for me. And so the further our goal feels from us, the harder it is to actually believe that could be a possibility. And so to start in that first step towards the athletic mindset is maybe for that person who doesn't walk regularly, let's say in their routine, instead of them thinking about what maybe step number 10 is, well, what can I do now today that would be achievable for me? And so as we start to get the brain to become more in belief of the possibility that we are able to create, it becomes easier and easier to attach ourselves to that vision, to actually see it in our mind, to actually feel it, and to start experiencing it. So instead of also comparing ourselves to other people, we just stay in our lane. And this is something that my swim coach used to always tell me when I was growing up. He would always tell me, Sherry, every time you turn to see who's next to you in the next lane, you always slow down. And so that's been my motto in life. Like, I stay in my lane. I know where I am right now, and I know where I want to go. But before I create a huge goal for myself, let me build on a goal that I know that I can achieve. And that's the thing about goals, is that we can make as many as we want. They're flexible. We can continue to change them. We continue to adapt as we also adapt and grow and improve. And so it's not about being super rigid around this one thing, but being realistic, achieving that thing, and then setting the next goal.
Yeah. And there's many different ways you can be an athlete. You know, you don't have to be like you talked about watching the documentaries of Michael Jordan, and, you know, you don't have to be Michael Phelps if you're a swimmer. Like, you can take very small, sustainable steps, and you can still harness an athletic identity without being a pro athlete.
Right. Absolutely. And that's coming back to the definition that an athlete is not a person who gets paid to professionally play their sport, but an athlete is a person who's engaged in all of that mindset, which is showing up for themselves, focusing on performance, really focusing on honoring their body, to refuel their body, and to really just constantly be in tune with what is important to them. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to, is really identifying what is important to me. If important to me is being in a bikini this summer just so that I can please other people and so that I don't judge myself and have others judge me, then maybe we have to redefine that goal. Because what would actually be important to me would be to have vitality, to be able to be there for my kids later, to be able to take care of my kids, to be a role model for my kids. And now those goals become more meaningful. And as I move towards those goals, the side effect of the actions that I'll take to move towards that goal, to be there for my kid, to have more vitality, is a physical transformation in my body. And that just becomes a side effect of what it was initially that I was aiming towards. And that whatever I was aiming towards was incredibly meaningful to me.
Yeah, it's about harnessing, what's important to you. And then, like you said, the result is that your body does change in ways that support your health and support those goals. It's not the other way around, which is how dieting tries to approach it. Like, okay, once you have the perfect body, then you can do all the things that are important to you. And no, it's really the
Right.
other way around.
Absolutely.
So I want to talk to you about your own journey with binging. You mentioned earlier in the show that you did experience binging, sort of as a rebound from dieting. How were you able to overcome that in your own life?
It was really harnessing self-love and just patience, really, that broke the cycle. And, we have this, I don't know if it's just women. I don't know if it is something that is imposed by our society, but we have this need to move towards perfection, whatever that means, whatever we've decided that means. And oftentimes that means also overwhelm. And so when we get into the space where everything has to be so perfect, and that generally comes with a set of rules and a set of rigidity, it's so easy to set ourselves up for failure, because the opposite of that perfection is failure. If I didn't do this, it only means one thing. It only means that I failed. And so there was a constant high pressure on myself. And as I mentioned, Kathryn, when I did develop a binge eating pattern, it wasn't because I was dieting to release weight. It was because I was dieting because I wanted to find the right way to eat, the way we're meant to eat, according to all these scientists and all these scientific studies. And so that for sure led to this sense of perfection, especially because I had hundreds of athletes around me that are looking up to me, that are inspired by me. And so I had this sense of responsibility that I had to show up a certain way for them, or that if I told them not to do this, then I better also honor what I'm saying. And I better also walk the walk that I'm talking, right? And so it really just stemmed from that place of establishing rigidity around how I ate and a lot of belief systems around food. And certain foods were good, and other foods were demonized as bad because the diet industry said it was bad. And this started to become very, very conflicting, because you'd read certain books, like a paleo book, where they were promoting eating meat. And then all of a sudden you read another book where now meat is a cause of diabetes. And so it started just to become really overwhelming. And so the day that I decided I was going to release this really just came with a lot of grace, self-grace. Just, it's all right, Sherry. It's okay. It's time to let go. It's time to just love yourself through it. And so instead of being very disappointed in myself after a binge, I started loving myself through it. I started just learning from it. I started to reverse engineer the binge and start to understand, where did it come from? And generally it would come from a trigger due to restriction, and due to either a feeling that I was allowed to reward myself, or that I allowed myself to have something that was not on my good list. And for every single person who is trapped in that binge eating pattern, their triggers are different. It could have been a traumatic experience in their childhood. It could have been something that someone said to them. It could have been because they grew up in a scarcity environment where food actually was scarce. It could have been because they've been dieting for years. So it's so important to understand also that even though the cycle might look the same for everyone, the root cause of it might be a little bit different. But what's so similar amongst all of these different scenarios is always self-love. And then when we harness self-love, when we harness that ability to be patient with ourselves, give ourselves love and grace as we move through this and as we heal through this, that ultimately becomes the energy that is actually able to completely interrupt the pattern.
I love so many things that you said there. I mean, first, how everyone is so different and how we all come to have this habit of binging. I mean, it does become wired into the brain. It does become something that happens automatically based on certain things that happen in your life or certain ways that you're eating. I was similar to you in that it did stem a lot from restriction and having that perfectionistic mindset. When you think you've failed, if you eat something off plan, it creates this energy in you that, oh my gosh, I've blown it. I might as well just eat everything. And if you can just release the perfectionism, then if you eat that one thing that's quote unquote off plan, then it's like, oh, I just ate something, big deal, and it's a completely different mind state. So I hope everyone, really took that to heart as far as what Sherry said about giving up perfectionism is super helpful.
And it's amazing, Kathryn, because it's actually very common. And people who suffer from a disordered relationship with food or any out of control behavior around food feel that they're suffering alone. And what's so interesting is just coming back to also what you mentioned earlier is we are wired to always think negatively. The brain is wired that way. And it's wired that way actually for a very good reason. It's the reason why we've evolved. It's the reason why we're always seeking something better. And so once we understand that, we don't allow that to then take control and take over all of our thoughts. We understand that perhaps the first negative thought that might come into our mind might be the default one. However, it's impossible to remove the negative thoughts. We can't do that. The only way that we're actually able to do that is by implanting more positive thoughts. It's like having weeds in your grass. And instead of plucking every single weed out every single day and watching it grow right back the next day, instead we add more grass seeds, and we continue to add more grass seeds until eventually that becomes more of the default setting. But it has to come to this place of awareness and understand, first of all, that we're not broken, that even if you have been in the health industry for 23 years, you're still just as susceptible to developing a binge eating pattern as anybody else, because we're wired that way. And it is the protection mechanism of the body to binge eat, to make sure that we have reserves for scarcity. So anytime we create that scarcity in our brain where we start to feel that food is not available because I'm going to stop eating desserts on Monday, or I'm going to stop carbs, or because I grew up in a scarce environment where food really was hard to come by and my mom did her best to feed me, then we trigger that part of us. It's a natural part of us. The moment we realize that, we can then have grace and self-love. It's not me. We're all the same. That's how we're wired, and wired for survival. But now let me get out of that survival mode and let me come back into safety mode. And I can only do that through calmness, self-love, grace, and patience.
Yeah. And feeding yourself enough. I teach people that all the time, that you're creating this survival response in yourself. And if you keep perpetuating that through dieting, then the binging is not going to go away. Just to close the show, like, you really overcame, a terrible injury and something that was a huge obstacle in your life to create your fitness now and helping other people. So, what would you tell someone who thinks they can't do it, who thinks they have an obstacle that they can't possibly overcome?
So I love that you asked this question. And I think we're all faced with something like this every single day. And I think the most important energy to harness is curiosity. And if we're curious, if we decide that we want to investigate, that we don't want to just take one answer as that being the conclusion to something that we're going through, and really become curious around learning and finding ways to overcome, I truly believe there's always a way. And for me, for example, I was told by many doctors that I would never exercise again. And I was told this when I was 16. But it was only when I became very curious to learn, well, what would it be like if I just started this? What would it be like if I just tried that? If I read more, if I learned more, and if while I'm doing that, listen to my body as my internal doctor, what would happen? And so I also invite everyone to take on the energy of curiosity when they start anything brand new in nutrition or around exercise. What would happen if for 30 days I walked? What would happen if I drank more water? And just add that sense of curiosity, because there's no attachment. If after those 30 days, I don't like it, it doesn't work for me, it doesn't resonate with me, then I don't have to take it on. We don't need to be so absolute and so rigid around what it is that we want to create. But it's that sense of curiosity that absolutely helps us find the answers and really helps us better listen to ourselves.
That's great. And all of this has been really helpful, Sherry. I appreciate you weighing in on the athletic mindset, on binge eating, on how to create fitness in your own life in a way that's sustainable and makes you feel good. How can people learn more about you?
So anyone can reach out to me via Instagram at Sherry Shaban Fitness, or email sherry@sherryshaban.com. I'm always available to support anyone through this. I'm so incredibly passionate about this topic because, again, it's having watched people suffer silently, including myself. It's beautiful to find that food freedom and really harness what we are always meant to be.
Well, thank you so much, Sherry, for being here on the Brain Over Binge podcast. I really appreciate it. It was great talking to you.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. This is really great. Enjoyed this today.